He wanted the best for Alicia, always. He was mad about her. She was just mad. You think she was insane? You tell me you're her shrink. What do you think? I know what I observed, and what was that? Mood swings, rages, violent fight fits. She'll break things, smash stuff up. Gabriel told me she threatened to murder him on several occasions. I should have listened, done something. After she tried to kill herself, I should have intervened, insisted she got some help. But I didn't. Gabriel was determined to protect her, and like an idiot, I let him. Max sighed and checked his watch, a cue for me to wrap up the conversation. I just stared at him blankly. Alicia tried to kill herself? What do you mean? When? You mean after the murder? Max shook his head. No, several years before that. You don't know? I assume you knew. When was this? After her father died, she took an overdose, pills or something. I can't remember exactly. She had a kind of breakdown. I was about to press him further when the door opened. The receptionist appeared and spoke in a sniffling voice. Darling, we should go. We'll be late. Right. Coming, dear. The door shut. Max stood up, giving me an apologetic glance. We have theater tickets. I must have looked startled because he laughed. We, Tanya and I, were married last year. Oh, I see. Gabriel's death brought us together. I couldn't have gotten through it without her. Max's phone rang, distracting him. I nodded at him to take the call. Thank you. You've been a great help. I slipped out the office. I took a closer look at Tanya in reception. She was blonde, pretty, rather petite. She blew her nose and I noticed the large diamond on her wedding finger. To my surprise, she got up and walked toward me, frowning. She spoke urgently in a low voice. If you want to know about Alicia, talk to her cousin, Paul. He knows her better than anyone. I tried calling her Aunt Linda Rose. She wasn't particularly forthcoming. Forget Linda. Go to Cambridge. Talk to Paul. Ask him about Alicia and the night after the accident and... The office door opened. Tanya immediately fell silent. Max emerged and she hurried over to him, smiling broadly. Ready, darling? She asked. Tanya was smiling. She sounded nervous. She's afraid of Max, I thought. I wonder why. Chapter 13. Alicia Spinnerson's Diary. July 22nd. I hate the fact there's a gun in the house. We had another argument about it last night. At least I thought that's what we were fighting about. I'm not so sure now. Gabriel said it was my fault we argued. I suppose it was. I hated seeing him so upset. Look at me with her eyes. I hate causing him pain, and yet sometimes I desperately wanted to hurt him, and I don't know why. He said I came home in a horrible mood, that I marched upstairs and started screaming at him. Perhaps I did. I suppose I was upset. I'm not altogether sure what happened. I had just gotten back from the park. I don't remember much of the walk. I was daydreaming, thinking about work, about the Jesus picture. I remember walking past the house on my way home. Two boys were playing with a hose. They couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. The older boy was spraying the younger with a jet of water, a rainbow color sparkling in the light, a perfect rainbow. The younger boy stretched out his hands, laughing. I walked past and I realized my cheeks were wet with tears. I dismissed it then, but thinking about it now, it seems obvious. I don't want to admit the truth to myself, that a huge part of my life is missing, that I've denied I want children, pretending I have no interest in them, that all I care about is my art. And it's not true. It's just an excuse. The truth is I'm scared to have kids. I am not to be trusted with them, not with my mother's blood running through my veins. That's what's on my mind, consciously or unconsciously. When I got home, Gabriel was right. I was in a bad state. But I never would have exploded if I hadn't found him cleaning the gun. It upsets me so much that he has it, and it hurts me he won't get rid of it. No matter how many times I beg him, he always says the same thing, that it was one of his father's old rifles from their farm and he gave it to him when he was 16, that it has a sentimental value and blah blah blah. I don't believe him. I think there's another reason he's keeping it. I said so, and Gabriel said there was nothing wrong with wanting to be safe, wanting to protect his house and wife. What if someone broke in? Then we called the police, I said. We don't fucking shoot them. I had raised my voice, but he raised his louder, and before I knew it, we were yelling at each other. Maybe I was a bit out of control, but I was only reacting to him. There's an aggressive side to Gabriel. A part of him I only glimpse occasionally, and when I do, it scares me. For those brief moments, it's like living with a stranger, and that's terrifying. We didn't speak for the rest of the evening. We went to bed in silence. This morning we had sex and made up. We always seem to resolve our problems in bed. It's easier somehow when you're naked and half asleep under the covers to whisper, I'm sorry, and mean it. All defenses and bullshit justifications are discarded, lying in a heap on the floor with our clothes. Maybe we should make it a rule to always conduct arguments in bed. He kissed me. I love you. I'll get rid of the rifle, I promise. No, I said. It doesn't matter. Forget it. It's okay, really. Gabriel kissed me again and pulled me close. I held onto him, laying my naked body on his. I closed my eyes and stretched out a friendly rock that was molded to my shape. And I felt at peace at last. July 23rd. I'm writing this in Café de la Artistia. I come home most days now. I keep feeling the need to get out of the house. When I'm around other people, even if it's only the bored waitress in here, I feel connected to the world somehow, like a human being. Otherwise, I'm in danger of ceasing to exist, like I might disappear. Sometimes I wish I could disappear, like tonight. Gabriel has invited his brother over for dinner. He sprung it on me this morning. We're not seeing Max in ages, he said. Not since Joel's housewarming. I'll do a barbecue. Gabriel looked at me strangely. You don't mind, do you? Why would I mind? Gabriel laughed. You're such a bad liar, you know that? I can read your face like a very short book. And what does it say? That you don't like Max. You never have. That's not true. I could feel myself going red. I shrugged and looked away. Of course I like Max. It'll be nice to see him. When are you going to sit for me again? I need to finish the picture. Gabriel smiled. How about this weekend? And about the painting? Do me a favor. Don't show Max, alright? I don't want him to see me as Jesus. I'll never live it down. Max won't see it. It's not ready yet. Even if it were, Max is the last person I want in my studio, I thought. That, but didn't say it. I'm dreading going home now. I want to stay here in this air-conditioned cafe and hide until Max has left. But the waitress is already making little impatient noises and emphatically checking her watch. I'll be kicked out soon, and that means short of wandering the streets all night like a mad person. I have no choice but to go home and face the music and face Max. July 24th. I'm back in the cafe. Someone was sitting at my table and the waitress gave me a sympathetic look. At least I think that's what she was communicating. A sense of solidarity, but I could be wrong. I took another table facing in, not out, but the air conditioning unit. There's not much light. It's cold and dark, which suits my mood. Last night was awful. Worse than I had thought it would be. I didn't recognize Max when he arrived. I don't think I ever seen him out of a suit before. He looked a bit silly in shorts. He was sweating profusely after the walk from the station. His bald head was red and shiny, and dark patches were spreading out from under his armpits. He wouldn't meet my eyes at first, or was it me not looking at him? He made a big thing of the house, saying how different it looked, how long it was since we invited him, that he was starting to think we would never ask again. Gabriel kept apologizing, saying how busy we've been, me with the upcoming exhibition and him with work. We're not seeing anyone. Gabriel was smiling, but I could tell he felt annoyed that Max had made such a point of it. I kept up a pretty good front at first. I was waiting for the right moment, and then I found it. Max and Gabriel went into the garden and got the barbecue going. I hung around in the kitchen on the pretext of making a salad. I knew Max would make an excuse to come and find me, and I was right. After about 5 minutes, I heard his heavy thumping footsteps. He doesn't walk at all like Gabriel. Gabriel is so silent. He's like a cat. I never hear him moving around the house at all. Alicia, Max said. I realized my hands were shaking as I chopped the tomatoes. I put down the knife. I turned around to face him. Max held up his empty beer bottle and smiled. He still wouldn't look at me. I've come for another. I nodded. I didn't say anything. He opened the fridge and took out another beer. He looked around for the opener. I pointed at it on the counter. He gave me a funny smile as he opened the beer, like he was going to say something, but I beat him to it. I'm going to tell Gabriel what happened. I thought you should know. Max stopped smiling. He looked at me for the first time with snake-like eyes. What? I'm telling Gabriel about what happened at Joel's. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I don't remember. I was rather drunk, I'm afraid. Bullshit. It's true. You don't remember kissing me? You don't remember grabbing me? Alicia, dumb. Don't what? Make a big deal out of it? You assaulted me. I could feel myself getting angry. It was an effort to control my voice and not start shouting. I glanced out the window. Gabriel was at the end of the garden, standing over the barbecue. The smoke and the hot air distorted my view of him, and he was all bent out of shape. He looks up to you, I said. You're his older brother. He's going to be so hurt when I tell him. Then don't. There's nothing to tell him. He needs to know the truth. He needs to know what his brother is really like. You. Before I could finish, Max grabbed my arm hard and pulled me toward him. I lost my balance and fell onto him. He raised his fist and I thought he was going to punch me. I love you, he said. I love you, I love you, I love you. Before I could react, he kissed me. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let me. I felt his rough lips all over mine and his tongue pushing its way into my mouth. Instinct took over. I bit his tongue as hard as I could. Max cried out and shoved me away. When he looked up, his mouth was full of blood. Fucking bitch, his voice was garbled, his teeth red. He glared at me like a wooden animal. I don't believe Max is Gabriel's brother. He has none of Gabriel's fine qualities, none of his decency, none of his kindness. Max disgusts me, and I said so. Alicia, don't say anything to Gabriel, he said. I mean it, I'm warning you. I didn't say another word. I could taste his blood on my tongue, so I turned on the tap and rinsed my mouth until it was gone. Then I walked out into the garden. Occasionally, I sensed Max staring at me over dinner. I looked up and catch his eye, and he'll look away. I didn't eat anything. The thought of eating made me sick. I kept tasting his blood in my mouth. I don't know what to do. I don't want to lie to Gabriel, nor do I want to keep it a secret. But if I tell Gabriel, he'll never speak to Max again. It would devastate him to know he's misplaced his trust in his brother, because he does trust Max. He idolizes him. He shouldn't. I don't believe that Max is in love with me. I believe he hates Gabriel, that's all. I think he's madly jealous of him, and he wants to take everything that belongs to Gabriel, which includes me. But now that I've stood up to him, I don't think he'll bother me again. At least I hope not. Not for a while anyway. So for the moment, I'm going to remain silent. Of course, Gabriel can read me like a book, or maybe I'm just not a very good actress. Last night we were getting ready for bed. He said I'd been weird the whole time Max was there. I was just tired. No, it was more than that. You were so distant. You might have made more of an effort. We barely ever see him. I don't know why you have such a problem with him. I don't. It was nothing to do with Max. I was distracted. I was thinking about work. I'm behind with the exhibition. It's all I can think about. I said this with as much conviction as I could muster. Gabriel gave me a disbelieving look, but he let it go for the moment. I'll have to face it again next time we see Max, but something tells me that won't be for a while. I feel better for having written this down. I feel safer somehow. Having it on paper means I have some evidence, some proof, if it ever comes to that. July 26. It's my birthday today. I'm 33 years old. It's strange. It's older than I ever saw myself as being. My imagination only ever extended this far. I've outlived my mother now. It's an unsteady feeling being older than she was. She got to 32 and then she stopped. Now I've outlived her and won't stop. I will grow older and older, but she won't. Gabriel was so sweet this morning. He kissed me awake and presented me with 33 red roses. They were beautiful. He pricked his finger on one of the thorns, a blood-red teardrop. It was perfect. Then he took me for a picnic in the park for breakfast. The sun was barely up, so the heat wasn't unbearable. A cool breeze was coming off the water and the air smelled of cut grass. We lay by the pond under a weeping willow on the blue blanket we brought in Mexico. The willow branches formed a canopy over us, and the sun burned hazily through the leaves. We drank champagne and ate small sweet tomatoes with smoked salmon and silvers of bread. Somewhere in the back of my mind was a vague feeling of familiarity, a nagging sense of deja vu I couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was simply a recollection of childhood stories, fairy tales, and magical trees being gateway to other worlds. Perhaps it was something more poetic. And then the memory came back to me. I saw myself when very young, sitting under the branches of the willow tree in our garden in Cambridge. I spent hours hiding there. I may not have been a happy child, but during the time I spent under the willow tree, I felt a similar contentment to laying here with Gabriel, and now it was as if the past and the present were coexisting simultaneously in one perfect moment. I wanted that moment to last forever. Gabriel fell asleep and I sketched him, trying to capture the dappled sunlight on his face. I did a better job with his eyes this time. It was easier because they were closed, but at least I got their shape right. He looked like a little boy, curled up asleep and breathing gently, crumbs around his mouth. We finished the picnic, went home, and had sex. And Gabriel held me in his arms and said something astonishing. Alicia, darling, listen, there's something on my mind I want to talk to you about. The way he said it made me instantly nervous. I braced myself, fearing the worst. Go on. I want us to have a baby. It took me a moment to speak. I was so taken aback I didn't know what to say. But you didn't want any children, you said. Forget that. I changed my mind. I want us to have a child together. Well, what do you say? Gabriel looked at me hopefully, expectantly, waiting for my response. I felt my eyes welling up with tears. Yes, I said. Yes, yes, yes. We hugged each other and cried and laughed. He's in bed now, asleep. I had to sneak away and write all this down. I want to remember this day for the rest of my life, every single second of it. I feel joyous. I feel full of hope. Chapter 14. I kept thinking about what Max Berenson had said about Alicia's suicide attempt following her father's death. There was no mention of it in her file, and I wondered why. I rang Max the next day, catching him just as he was leaving the office. I just want to ask you a couple more questions if you don't mind. I'm literally walking out the door. This won't take long. Max sighed and lowered the phone to say something unintelligible to Tanya. 5 minutes, he said. That's all you get. Thanks, I appreciate it. You mentioned Alicia's suicide attempt. I was wondering which hospital treated her. She wasn't admitted to the hospital. She wasn't? No, she recovered at home. My brother looked after her, but surely she saw a doctor. It was an overdose, you said? Yes, and of course Gabriel got a doctor over and the doctor agreed to keep it quiet. Who was the doctor? Do you remember his name? There was a pause as Max thought for a moment. I'm sorry, I can't tell you. I can't recall. Was it their GP? No, I'm sure it wasn't. My brother and I share a GP. I remember Gabriel made a point of asking me not to mention it to him. And you're sure you can't remember a name? I'm sorry, is that all? I have to go. Just one more thing. I was curious about the terms of Gabriel's will. A slight intake of breath, and Max's tone instantly sharpened. His will? I really don't see the relevance. Was Alicia's the main beneficiary? I must say, I find that rather an odd question. Well, I'm trying to understand what? Max went on without waiting for a reply, sounding annoyed. I was the main benefactor. Alicia had inherited a great deal of money from her father, so Gabriel felt she was well provided for, and so he left the bulk of the estate to me. Of course, he has no idea his estate will become so valuable after his death. Is that it? And what about Alicia's will? When she dies, who inherits? That, Max says firmly, is more than I can tell you, and I sincerely hope this will be our last conversation. There was a click as he hung up, but something in his tone told me this wouldn't be the last I hear from Max Berenson. I didn't have to wait long. Michaelides called me into his office after lunch. He looked up when I walked in but didn't smile. What is the matter with you? With me? Don't play the idiot. You know who I had a call from this morning? Max Berenson. He says you contacted him twice and asked a lot of personal questions. I asked him for some information about Alicia. He seemed fine with it. Well, he's not fine now. He's calling it harassment. Oh, come on. The last thing we need is a lawyer making a fuss. Everything you do must be within the confines of the unit and under my supervision, understood? I was angry, but I nodded. I stared at the floor like a sullen teenager. Michaelides responded appropriately, giving me a paternal pat on the shoulder. Theo, let me give you some advice. You're going about this the wrong way. You're asking questions, searching for clues like it's a detective story. He laughed and shook his head. You won't get to it like that. Get to what? The truth. Remember, Bion? No memory, no desire, no agenda. As a therapist, your only goal is to be present and receptive to your feelings as you sit with her. That's all you need to do. The rest will take care of itself. I know, you're right. Yes, I am, and don't let me hear you've been making any more visits to Alicia's relations, understood? You have my word. Chapter 15. That afternoon, I went to Cambridge to visit Alicia's cousin, Paul Rose. As the train approached the station, the landscape flattened out and the fields let in an expanse of cold blue light. I felt glad to be out of London. The sky was less oppressive and I could breathe more easily. I left the train along with a trickle of students and tourists, using the map on my phone to guide me. The streets were quiet. I could hear my footsteps on the pavement echoing. Abruptly, the road stopped. A wasteland lay ahead, muddy earth and grass leading to the river. Only one house stood alone by the river, obstinate and imposing, like a large red brick thrust into the mud. It was ugly, a Victorian monster. The walls were overgrown with ivy and the garden had been overtaken by plants, weeds mostly. I got the sense of nature encroaching, reclaiming territory that has once been hers. This was the house where Alicia had been born. It was where she spent the first 18 years of her life. When these walls, her personality had been formed. The roots of her adult life, all causes and subsequent choices were buried here. Sometimes it's hard to grasp why the answers to the present lie in the past. A simple analogy might be helpful. A leading psychiatrist in the field of sexual abuse once told me she had, in 30 years of extensive work with pedophiles, never met one who hadn't himself been abused as a child. This doesn't mean that all abused children go on to become abusers, but it is impossible for someone who was not abused to become an abuser. No one is born evil. As Winnicott put it, a baby cannot hate the mother without the mother first hating the baby. As babies, we are innocent sponges, blank slates, with only the most basic needs present, to eat, shed, love, and be loved. But something goes wrong, depending on the circumstances into which we are born and the house in which we grow up. A tormented, abused child can never take revenge in reality, as she is powerless and defenseless, but she can and must harbor vengeful fantasies in her imaginations. Rage, like fear, is reactive. Something bad happened to Alicia, probably early in her childhood, to provoke the murderous impulses that emerged all those years later. Whatever the provocation, not everyone in this world would have picked up the gun and fired it point blank into Gabriel's face. Most people could not. That Alicia did so points to something disordered in her internal world. That's why it was crucial for me to understand what life had been like for her in this house, to find out what happened to shape her, make her into the person she became, a person capable of murder. I wandered further into the overgrown garden through the weeds and wavering wildflowers, and made my way along the side of the house. At the back was a large willow tree, a beautiful tree, majestic with long bare branches sweeping to the ground. I pictured Alicia as a child playing around it, and in the secret, magical world beneath its branches. I smiled. Then I felt uneasy. Suddenly, I could sense someone's eyes on me. I looked up at the house. A face appeared at the upstairs window. An ugly face, an old woman's face pressed against the glass, staring straight at me. I felt a strange, inexplicable silver of fear. I didn't hear the footsteps behind me until too late. There was a bang, a heavy thud, and a stab of pain at the back of my head. Everything went black. Chapter 16. I woke up on the hard, cold ground on my back. My first sensation was pain. My head was throbbing, stabbing as if my skull had been cracked open. I reached up and gradually touched the back of my head. "No blood," said a voice, "but you'll have a nasty bruise tomorrow, not to mention a cracking headache." I looked up and saw Paul Rose for the first time. He was standing above me, holding a baseball bat. He was about my age, but taller and broad with it. He had a boyish face and a shock of red hair, the same color as Alicia's. He reeked of whiskey. I tried to sit up but couldn't quite manage it. Better stay there, recover for a second. "I think I got a concussion." "Possibly. What the fuck did you do that for? What did you expect me? I thought you were a burglar." "Well, I'm not. I know that now. I went through your wallet. You're a psychotherapist." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out my wallet. He tossed it at me. It landed on my chest. I reached for it. "I saw your ID. You're at that hospital, the Grove?" I nodded and the movement made my head throb. "Yes." "Then you know who I am?" "Alicia's cousin." Paul Rose here held out his hand. "Here, let me help you up." He pulled me to my feet with surprising ease. He was strong. I was unsteady on my feet. "You could have killed me," I murmured. Paul shrugged. "You could have been armed. You were trespassing. What did you expect? Why are you here?" "I came to see you," I grimaced in pain. "I wish I hadn't. Come and sit down for a second." I was in too much pain to do anything other than go where he led me. My head was throbbing with every step. We went inside the back door. The inside of the house was just as dilapidated as the outside. The kitchen walls were covered with an orange geometric design that looked 40 years out of date. The wallpaper was coming away from the wall in patches, curling, twisting, and blackening as if it were catching fire. Mummified insects were hanging suspended from cobwebs in the corners of the ceiling. The dust was so thick on the floor it looked like a dirty carpet, and an and an underlying odor of cat piss made me feel sick. I counted at least 5 cats around the kitchen, sleeping on chairs and surfaces. On the floor, open plastic bags overflowed with stinking tins of cat food. Sit down, I'll make some tea. Paul leaned the baseball bat against the wall by the door. I kept my eye on it. I didn't feel safe around him. Paul handed me a cracked mug full of tea. Drink this. You have any painkillers? Got some aspirin somewhere. I'll have a look. Here. He showed me a bottle of whiskey. This will help. He poured some of the whiskey into the mug. I sipped it. It was hot, sweet, and strong. There was a pause as Paul drank his tea, staring at me. I was reminded of Alicia and that piercing gaze of hers. How is she? He asked eventually. He continued before I could reply. I've not been to see her. It's not easy getting away. Mom's not well. I don't like to leave her alone. I see. When was the last time you saw Alicia? Oh, years. Not for a long while. We lost touch. I was at their wedding. I saw her a couple of times after that, but Gabriel was quite possessive, I think. She stopped calling anyway. Once they got married, stopped visiting. Mom. I didn't speak. I could hardly think with throbbing in my head. I could feel him watching me. So what did you want to see me for? For some questions. I wanted to ask you about Alicia, about her childhood. Paul nodded and poured some whiskey into his mug. He seemed to be relaxing now. The whiskey was having an effect on me too, taking the edge off my pain. I was thinking better. Stay on track, I told myself. Get some facts, then get the hell out of here. You grew up together? Paul nodded. Mom and I moved in here when my dad died. I was about 8 or 9. It was only meant to be temporary, I think. But then Alicia's mother was killed in the accident, so Mom stayed on to take care of Alicia and Uncle Vernon. Vernon Rose, Alicia's father? Right, and Vernon died here a few years ago? Yes, several years ago. Paul frowned. He killed himself, hanged himself. Upstairs in the attic, I found the body. That must have been terrible. Yeah, it was tough. On Alicia, mostly. Come to think of it, that's the last time I saw her. Uncle Vernon's funeral. She was in a bad way. Paul stood up. You want another drink? I tried to refuse, but he kept talking as he poured more whiskey. I never believed that, that she killed Gabriel. It didn't make any sense to me. Why not? Well, she wasn't like that at all. She wasn't a violent person. She is now, I thought, but I didn't say anything. Paul sipped his whiskey. She's still not talking? No, she's still not talking. It doesn't make sense. None of it, I think she was. We were interrupted by thumping, banging on the floor above. There was a muffled voice, a woman's voice. Her voice were unintelligible. Paul leaped to his feet. Just a sec. He walked out. He hurried to the floor of the stairs. He raised his voice. Everything all right, Mom? A mumbled response that I couldn't understand came from upstairs. What? Oh, all right. Just a minute. He sounded uneasy. Paul glanced at me across the hallway, frowning. He nodded at me. She wants you to go up.